So I think when we hear the word psychopath in everyday language, we use that as a shorthand for some of the most depraved, some of the most evil people we can think of. And that's about as far as it goes when it comes to how everyday people talk. When we think in terms of a research grade psychopath, someone that would be diagnosable with something like the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, there's a lot of impulsivity that factors into psychopathy that this shooter simply didn't seem to exhibit from everything that we've noticed so far. He was very planful about how he acquired his weaponry, how he delivered it to the room. It looks like he was planful about casing out the location that he was using and the places that he was going to be shooting. And as a consequence, it doesn't seem like he fits the bill for an impulsive act. When we look in the course of his life, the very little that's known so far, he also had relatively stable employment, it seems, was able to retire a multimillionaire, according to his brother. So it's not the life course of someone who would be impulsive. So when we think about psychopathy, he's missing at least one key part of it, and that part is what we would often call disinhibition, or a lack of planfulness, a lack of an ability to live one's life according to any reasonable plan. Rather, this guy seemed to have a lot of plans about what to do, and fairly detailed plans. He had cameras in his room, he was watching the police activities, and this did not have the hallmark of someone who was impulsive. Yes, and so the second part of that may be what the sheriff may have been keying into. It's a part of psychopathy that we call meanness, and that's a focus of a lot of my recent research. We subdivide meanness in different ways, and the thing that really strikes in any of these kinds of vicious activities is the part of it we call malice. It's a use of other people and viewing them as objects rather than as actual human beings. It's associated with all kinds of violence, even seeking out violent activities, and perhaps believing that society's rules don't really apply to him. And the problem with assuming that he's high in even this malice component of meanness is we don't have a lot of biographical information to suggest he was consistently mean. So taking this one horrific act and extrapolating an entire lifestyle from that is probably premature from a professional perspective. He also didn't seem to be behind the coldness part of meanness, the part of meanness that reflects a lack of connection with other people and a lack of empathy across the lifespan. And again, one can say, to commit an act like this, one has to be somewhat disconnected from others, and one has to have a lack of empathy to a certain degree. But the problem is that's one action, and it's not necessarily a whole life course. We just don't know enough about him, who he was, how he interacted with people, to be able to say that he was a cold individual. There's another component of meanness that talks about an inability to be influenced by others' negative emotions overall, either just by themselves or in response to their attempts to change your behavior. We call that part imperviousness. Again, I don't know enough about his history. I don't know that a lot of people know how he responded to criticism, how much shame he had, how fearful he was about being rejected, these kinds of things. There's so much we simply don't know about him that makes us think, I'm not sure how mean he was as a person, as opposed to simply committing a terribly malicious and cold act. The third part of psychopathy that seems to be associated with people's ability to be successful is what we call boldness, or sometimes fearless dominance. And it's this lack of fear and anxiety across intrapersonal, interpersonal, and environmental stressors. So he had a pilot's license, suggesting that an activity that some people might be afraid of in terms of being a pilot and flying a plane was something he indulged in. But that license, the last time he had a physical for that was in 2008, and I believe the license had lapsed. And as far as I know, that's the only real sensation-seeking that he partook in. So it's unclear whether, again, he has a life course of this sort of stuff, or if that's just one little thing that factored in. The Valium prescription he's reported having suggests that he actually experienced an abnormal amount of stress or anxiety, and so contraindicates the notion of him being a bold individual. And likewise, the kinds of careers he was talked about having weren't the kinds of leadership roles. And similarly, not in his community, he wasn't seen as a leader in the same sort of way as someone who was truly bold would be perceived as. So overall, it is unclear where he would stand on at least two of these three factors of psychopathy, and he probably was not disinhibited.